We're here today with three prominent jazz musicians who have been here for a number of years. I'm going to have them each talk a little bit about themselves. But this is Gus Mancuso, Tom Hall, and Woody Woods. And just have each of you just talk a little bit about your background here in Las Vegas, when you moved here, why you moved here, just some of the different people you've worked with. Woody?
Oh, okay. I came here in '72. I came here with a show called Turn It On. It was the year that the Hacienda remodeled their showroom. They spent $1 million, which was a lot of money in those days. And I came here as an arranger, orchestrator, rehearsal pianist for this opening show. And that was my first gig. That's what brought me here from LA, because we had rehearsed the show in LA and we came here, and I fell in love with this place. I just thought it was wonderful. But that's how I got here.
Awesome.
Well, I came here.
That's enough.
I was trying to get away from him. It never works out.
That's the worst arrangement I ever.
Anyway, after I left Berklee School of Music, I was traveling with my vocal group, and we were working here at the Sands one time, opposite Red Norvo's group and my vocal group, and Maury King and the Strings. Remember Maury King? One nice spring day in 1955, and had just finished playing with John Hudgens, used to be a lead trumpet player, and was conducting for Gordon McCrae. And we worked a fair in Dallas, and I drove out here the first day, and there's John Hudgens at the Flamingo rehearsing Gordon McCrae. I go in to say hello. He says, "What are you going to do?" I says, "I guess I'm going to put in a card and see about work." He said, "Let me make a call." He called Earl Green at the Dunes. Earl said, "Have him come in and play tonight." I played one tune, and Earl said, "You're hired." So that's how I got started.
Gus, how about you?
Well, yeah. Gee, these are great stories. I really don't have much to tell. I came to town. I guess I don't know. When did I get out of the Army?
54.
54, okay. Well, I got out of the Army 3 days before I got out of the Army. Tony Pastor. Anybody know that name? Remember that name?
Very famous.
He
big
had a
band.
very famous big man. He came to town. He came to the Army camp. Tony Pastor pulled me over and he said, "When are you getting out of the Army?" I said, "I'm out in a few days." He said, "Would you be interested in coming with my band?" And I thought, oh, this guy's putting me on about details and details. And he was opening in Reno, Nevada, in just a few days. So I said, what else would I say? I said, yes. Anyhow, so I worked in Reno, Nevada. Everybody in Reno told me, he said, this is no place for you. You should be in Las Vegas. Louis Prima had become a big star here in the lounges. Mm-hmm. And somebody here, I can't remember his name, he thought that Tony Pastor would be just like Louis Prima. Because Tony was a funny man. He told jokes all the time, and they figured he would be the same on stage. Tony was a good player. In fact, a great saxophone player had left him his saxophone. Anyhow, we ended up here, and we went to work at the New Frontier had just opened. I saw guys like this who owned their own homes, had swimming pools, had wires. I never saw a musician with a jazz musician. Exactly. What's happening here in this town, man? Every hotel had a lounge and a showroom. The showrooms were only the lounges were built to take over the overflow from the big bands, from the big rooms,
Right.
because they would have an hour before something would happen in the lounge that they wanted to see, so they'd go and gamble in between, and that's how the lounges took form.
You'd recognize the lounges. They're all called Keno parlors.
Yeah, they they find other things to do with them.
I heard you.
And all of a sudden, that was the end of that. And then it took me a year before I got my union card. I worked one gig with an accordion player, Al DuPaulis. The only gig I had one gig in 1 year. Then Carl came to town.
Carl Fontana.
Fontana. Carl moved in and we had the same problem. Carl waited a long time. Then I got this gig at the Black Magic, and the union, they allowed me to work at the Black Magic for a while without the card. And then I managed to go down and pull Carl into the Black Magic with me.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden, my phone was ringing all the time, man. I worked every lounge in town with the worst groups you ever heard in your life, and some of the best groups you ever heard in your life. Cal Jader was coming to town all the time. They were bringing jazz players to town. Oscar Peterson was here, and anyhow, before you know it, I was working everywhere. I worked every show band there was, man, and some of them were really bad. Show bands, you know. But at least they talked over the microphone.
What did you play on the band? What instrument? You play so many. You guys play so many instruments.
I was playing trombone until this happened. Everybody was getting doubles, you know. I cashed my check behind Charlie McLean.
Yeah.
Remember
Charlie used to play
McLean?
first alto in my
Yeah.
band.
But saxophone players all had doubles. They'd play alto sax, they'd play tenor, they'd play alto flute,
Clarinet.
bassoon.
Bassoon.
But whatever the doubles were, they would either rent one or they would have one. And anyhow, I cashed my check behind who did I say? Charlie McLean. And his check was like $150 more than mine. And scale was only $125 back then. It used to be said.
For the week? For the week?
Yeah, for the week.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because when I first came to town, I was making $75 with Tony Patsy, and scale in town was 100, and they went on strike and made it 115, and then it moved up to 125. Anyhow, I've been here ever since.
Worked with a lot of great names, man.
Yeah,
Like Billy Eckstein.
I've been with
Billy Eckstein?
Yeah,
We both work with Billy.
Yeah, that's right. He did before I did. And I traveled with Billy Eckstein too.
What was that
I
like?
traveled with Sarah
It was
Vaughan
great.
for 2 years.
From here, you were living here, but going
Yeah, we were living here. And we were
Traveling with them.
we were working the Sahara Lounge a lot then, and Sassy would come and sit in the front row anytime Billy was there. She loved the way Billy sang, man, and
Yeah.
she
They were
phrased
good
like
friends.
Billy, and she would be in the front row all the time. Of course, then she would come over to, what was the drummer's name at the duplex where you guys would rehearse over there? And I lived in the next duplex, so we were always hanging together and rehearsing and playing and like that, you know. So
Well, you kind of answered some of the questions, but I just let you guys talk. But like the jazz scene, I know we're sitting with the jazz scene partially. You guys were the beginning of what happened here in Vegas. We're trying to trace back as far as we can to like the true jazz players. Vinny had his versions of Southern, and you.
Well,
definitely-
Vinny came a lot
He was later. You guys
he
were
was
here
later.
much later.
He when you come here, 53?
So
53.
I came here,
I
I mean,
was here
6
2 days after I got out.
63. I
out
came
my-
here
out of the
65.
army.
as much as the jazz scene and relating to the work that was in the casinos, but what was going on in jazz as far as like innovation, guys playing, and then also another Woody, because we were talking about the segregation that was in the west side, the east side.
Yeah.
And was there a scene going with the African American and the players in spite of the segregation. We know that we established that Sammy
Yeah.
couldn't go through the front door until Frank said, if he doesn't go through the front door, I'm
Yeah.
not playing, right? But that the whole, just a reflection of the whole, what was going on.
Well, we were playing over there,
Right.
and,
Well,
and
so,
they were
okay,
playing
that's-
over
that's-
here.
Well, they had jazz rooms over there.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
we'd go over there and play.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
So we played over there, and we would bring them over here to play. They just couldn't stay over here,
Right.
and that was ridiculous.
Oh,
You know,
it was terrible,
it was
man.
terrible.
At the New Frontier, which is where I opened with Tony Pastor, we had a band room, and when we closed, a black group opened opposite us. I forget the name of the group. In fact, Frank Ross used to tell me they talk about such and such started the lounges. He said that group started the lounges, man, because they were remodeling and they worked on the outside of the thing, and they packed a place, and I can't remember the name of the group, but he said that's all a false kind of thing. He said, but anyhow, I closed with Tony Pastor, and I went back there to finish up taking my last few things I had left there. And there was nobody in there, and I grabbed one of the security guards. I said, "Where's the band?" And they said, "No, it's all black band." And I said, "What?" He said, "It's all black band." I said, "So?" He said, "Well, we don't let black bands in there." I couldn't believe he said that. I'm
When
from
you
Rochester,
in the
New
dressing
York.
room, you mean?
Huh?
They wouldn't let him in the dressing
Wouldn't
room?
let him. They weren't allowed in the dressing room. Not only that, the room was like this backstage. There was a grand piano up in the thing. I think it was the Last Frontier. And they had a big grand piano up on stage, and the room was empty like this.
Oh my goodness.
And the guys were just walking around. They weren't allowed to. I mean, Tom and I talked about this, but if you were from back east, you heard about this kind of thing, but you didn't believe it.
Oh, wow.
You heard about it, that they couldn't use the same drinking fountains you could, use the same bathrooms you could. I laughed at this, you know. Billie Holiday, in fact, took the singer's place that I did on Tony Pastor's band, Billie Holiday, and went down south, and she couldn't believe it either. But what she wrote in her book, at least.
But the musicians were colorless, to use it.
Oh yeah, well that's always been.
Well, there weren't very many colored people in town.
Right, but I mean, it wasn't. There was no.
Oh no, it was as integrated
reflection.
as you could get,
Right.
as long as you could find people to play.
Right.
That's all you wanted to do. But getting back to, you wanted to know something about the earlier jazz here.
Yes, early as
Did
possible.
anybody mention the Silver Slipper, which was
Not yet.
that used to be like Charlie Ventura, Georgie Hall, Jack Teagarden, Wingy Manone, all those
Charlie
guys.
Teagarden,
And we would
Jack
go in.
Teagarden.
We would go in and sit in, and then we couldn't buy anything. They would give us drinks, give us food, and all that, and that's how we met all of those
Till
people.
7 or 8 o'clock in the
So
morning.
that was one of the major.
That was
clubs.
a major hang.
Well, Black Magic was number one.
Well, yeah, but it was a smaller club, you know. But and then we had another. What was that name of that other club on Paradise Row where you could cook a steak and play all night?
Oh, yeah.
What was the name of that?
I don't know. It was on the same side of the street
Yeah,
as the Black
on the
Magic.
way to the Black Magic, we'd
Yeah.
stop there, and you could grill steaks and things and jazz all night. Everything was jazz all night until the sun came up, you know, everywhere.
This is long before the Tender Trap.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and then
And I worked at Tender Trap for a couple of years.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It was another jazz club that did very well.
and then some of the acts would bring, like Phil Harris brought in Nick Fatul, Joe Reisman, Matty Matlock, Joe Venuti, and we were sessioning with those guys every night. There was a session, and so that was a lot of my beginning, getting in touch with jazz here, the early jazz here.
So there was
That's
a
what
lot of
all those
creativity
guys-
happening outside of the.
Oh
because of
yeah,
the
we would
number-
do our shows. In fact, I was working the DI then.
We
and-
were going on the west side quite often because Bob Bailey, who
Yeah.
died just
He
recently.
used to be a councilman here, but he owned black clubs. and we would go over there and play
And he
because
was a
he loved
jazz
jazz.
lover and,
Oh yeah.
and put together a lot of jazz things.
So-
Yeah, I used to work with Bob when he and his wife opened the Baby Grand over
Yeah.
on Sahara. They had the piano bar. So
Yeah.
we used to work that a lot. But, you know, when you were talking about the attitude, the racial attitude, when I first came, which was way after you guys, I remember the first time an agent told me, she took a look at my group and said, "Oh no, can't have an all-black band."
You believe that?
Wow.
I said, "Nope, can't work." She said, "You got to have one white person, at least." And I was like,
I thought
"What?"
when people
And I'm
tell
like-
me a story like that, I never believed it.
Well,
I thought they were putting me off.
No, it was the absolute truth when I got here in terms of the strip. Now, where we could work was at the Moulin Rouge.
Well, the Moulin Rouge.
I did a lot of. We had a jazz trio, me and Brad Bobo, and I forget who the drummer was right this minute. But we used to work a lot of the restaurants, and we were actually playing jazz. We weren't playing R&B and stuff, and we were working 3 and 4 nights a week at $150 a night, which was great at that
Are you
time.
kidding?
A
It's
night?
great right
a
now.
night,
That's
a
like
night.
That's like
That was a week.
salary.
That
Well,
was a week.
you
for-
know, the problem financially is they're still paying 1980 wages here.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And what's
Less
this,
than-
Well,
2015?
I don't know about
You
the
know?
union, but isn't the union asked for more
Well,
money?
we didn't
there?
I couldn't get union.
Oh, you
gigs.
couldn't get.
I was in the
Oh,
union.
well, of
I was
course
a-
not, yeah.
Why couldn't you get union gigs?
well, they didn't call us for anything. You
Well-
know, so I mean, you just didn't get a call. It wasn't that we couldn't
Yeah.
physically do it, but those weren't the calls that I got. I mean,
Hmm.
you know,
Well, they
it was
started.
around the 80s or the middle of the 80s when I really was working the strip itself as a musician. I did stuff as an arranger. I did shows for folks and all kinds of stuff. And I tell you who gave me a lot of work was Eagle Eye.
Eli.
I did arrangements for his big band. He had a small big band, 12 pieces. And we did a whole lot of killer stuff. And I worked with the Ink Spots and a whole bunch of other stuff. We were at the Four Queens, and and I worked with Eagle Eye and several other people when they used to have the Monday Night Jazz at the Four Queens. And in fact, the first night that I did it, I can't think of the name of the tune.
Joyce
Spring.
Joyce Spring.
Yeah.
I'd never played
Brown.
Joyce Spring, ever. That's the first tune they called. The
Good luck.
first tune. And it changes key 3 times,
Yeah, you-
right?
you fly-
And even the groove, because the bridge is and fortunately the guitar player took the first solo. And that's when I learned to change it.
Holy cow. That's
Live on the
that's
radio.
That's a tough one to learn.
Well, yeah, but I had to.
It's
But
hard
I
to
didn't
do-
have any
tune
choice
to
because
play.
mine was next. So
Oh yeah.
And so a lot of the jazz too at the time then it was like it was elsewhere, like New York, L.A., but a lot of it was ear, right? You're using your ear.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, guys,
Oh,
you're
yeah,
not reading out of-
absolutely.
You're not reading out of the real book wasn't.
no,
was
there,
not
no,
in
Yeah.
existence,
no, it
right?
wasn't a real
Everything
book.
was by ear.
So what do you guys think, like, as far as, like, learning the jazz on the streets versus when the universities came into existence, you know, back when Frank
Frank
was
started,
here,
yeah.
there were only, what, maybe 10 schools that had jazz at a university level. It was all classical, right?
Yeah.
Only a few. North
Yeah,
Texas was
he's
the
talking
first.
about Frank.
Frank Gagliardi.
Oh,
But-
yeah, because he's the one that hired me here.
He did?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah, I was the music teacher.
He hired you to teach here? the
Yeah.
first- What did you teach? You taught theory or
Jazz.
improv?
I taught jazz, and I taught,
Improvisation.
and I started a jazz choir.
Oh, fantastic.
I had
Wow.
two jazz choirs. One was could read a little bit of music. The other couldn't read at all. And the jazz thing, Frank made it so that you had to take my class in order to be on the jazz band.
Oh, excellent. Because there wasn't
Very
a
good.
jazz major yet, so he didn't have a curriculum.
Right.
But he tied
Yeah.
it into being in the jazz band to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to learn to improvise.
Yeah, and then
And we used to
and
come
in
over to do
fact,
clinics
I was
here.
going to
We were talking, the university learning jazz in the university system rather than like everybody did by just listening to the records and on the street. When it turned around, did you notice a big difference? Was there how did jazz here in Las Vegas change when the university programs started to come into existence, and CSN too, Tom Ferguson, right?
Right.
Yeah,
That
I
going-
worked with them.
did that change the jazz? The what was going on innovatively, or what? Or that's not even a word. But what was happening off the strip with musicians working on their craft as artists, as jazz artists?
For
Well,
me, the youngsters that I've come into contact with and worked with have a more, and I hope this isn't a wrong word to use, but it's the one that comes to mind, scientific approach, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I worked with some folks at the rehearsal that I just came from with Halsey and several other folks, right? And the drummer,
Charles.
No.
Halsey Hart.
Halsey Hart.
Oh,
Halsey
yeah,
Hart,
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry.
and,
I'm sorry. I didn't
and
remember.
she brought a drummer for us because our drummer wasn't available. And then that day when I did the rehearsal with you guys here,
Right.
and I'm hearing, the word is not scientific, I'm sorry. The word is educated.
Okay.
And it's very refreshing. Now, what you miss is the experience, because you get that by either playing on the bandstand or doing a heck of a lot of listening. Gives you that mature quality. But, it's nice to know that there is an educated approach to jazz. And that's what I hear and that's what I see.
I think some of the first that I remember of the integrating starting to happen was Frank used to work gigs with us and different hotel bands and stuff like that, and
Drums
he
or-
would tell us, huh?
When you say you work, you mean on drums playing?
Gigliotti, yeah,
Right.
percussion and stuff
Percussion,
like that, And so through that, we got to know different musicians, and we would actually integrate them into bands ourselves, have them come and play, just sit in or sit with the band just without playing, and then come in and play with us and things like that because of Frank. And then we would come over here and do various clinics and things like that.
I
for
think
him, like-
Frank had a lot to do with.
he was really
jazz
responsible
program
for
started here.
the integration of legitimate teaching and on the street playing. I
Yeah,
think he he gave a great start to that, and he invited us in to do classes and clinics and stuff like that. And I remember doing one with Billy Byers here in Quincy, as a matter of fact,
And
years and years ago.
Stan Kenton's bass trombone player.
Billy, not Bill. No, not Billy Hughes.
Oh,
He was teaching here too, because I talked to him on the phone.
Oh, who is it?
Harold? No. Can't think.
You know what I mean?
yeah,
He lived here in town for a while.
yeah.
So was it a positive? It was a positive
Oh,
direction.
definitely a
But
positive.
what he's saying,
yeah.
I understand what he's saying about the educated, the analytical, maybe you'd say, or
That
educated,
too.
And we actually try to get to the emotion, the soul. What we try to make sure that's a part of it, because we keep telling them, we say,
Yeah.
and it's not only the other musicians that are your competition now. It's Macintosh. It's the computer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
of course one of the reasons why a lot of the work is diminished, because everybody's running out using samples instead of
Right.
players. It's just to save money, economics. It says you have to bring emotion and feeling. You have to touch someone. You can't just play it perfectly. You can't just read it perfectly first time. You can't just play it. You have to bring in feeling to
Yeah.
reach someone.
Yeah.
And how do you teach that? Back at that time when this was really flourishing, was it real how was it different than like Chicago, LA, and New York as far as the jazz scene that was going? It was really vibrant, maybe not as lot, but how would you compare it? Because you guys traveled around too. You heard what was going on in those places.
Oh yeah, well it was more family-like.
Okay.
Actually, the jazz scene here, there was a lot of jazz going on. I don't think it was of the competitive nature of, say, New York or this way with you would kill for a job. Everybody was working.
Right. So economically, they were secure. So they-
Yeah, yeah. Because of the
Well,
house bands,
Right.
most guys had extra regular income in. But immediately after the house jobs, it was all night jazz, and it was a creative thing, and everybody loved getting together, and it was beautiful.
So you would get together so at the clubs primarily. That's where a lot of this happened.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of like late at night, and people would. Was it just calling tunes, or was it like original tunes? Or was it mostly standards at the
Well,
time? Where the guys would play.
A lot of both.
Right.
A lot of both.
Was that
You know.
called
It was
Hobnob?
the recent bebop tunes that were
Right.
being recorded, Charlie
That's what it was.
Parker,
Right.
and those kind of things, and standard tunes. And standard, you
Right.
had to have both bags.
You know, and
You
then they were big kicks bands
But when
rehearsing all night.
they
you
used
know.
to ask you if you want to take the gig, do you know the tunes? That's what they meant.
And they mean that.
Oh, yeah.
You know the
Standard
tunes.
tunes.
Literally.
Right.
And some of the
Right.
bebop.
You know,
recent
there used to
bebop
be a
tunes.
place on Industrial called the Hobnob,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was a cowboy joint, really, all week long except Tuesday night was a jazz jam session, and we used to go every Tuesday night and hang out, and it'd be killing. Well, I mean, and we could play anything we wanted to, you know. And to answer your question, yes, it was just cats calling tunes, and so you had to roll with it, whatever it was.
And with the big bands, they were writing all original stuff. We had with kicks bands after hours all
Mhm.
night. You know, like the first day I walked into town and went to that rehearsal at the Flamingo I was telling you about. The trombone section was Bill Harris, Carl Fontana, Jimmy Gwynn, Sam Noto was a trumpet section, like that. And then we would get together at night. The guys would, they liked the way you played. They would write you a tune, you know. And then we had a whole
So they
book
could
full of
try
stuff.
out their
Oh, yeah.
arrangements or originals
Yeah.
in these late nights. So there was a place, a venue for them
Oh,
to
definitely,
experiment,
yeah.
right?
And
The first
especially
kicks
at the
band,
club,
first
at the
kicks,
Union Hall.
yeah, first kicks band I went to, Wes Hensel says, I wrote you a thing tonight. So he pulls out this tune and he says, now I got another one. He gives me his version of Good Morning Heartaches for alto on this big band he wrote. And then when he went to teach at Berkeley, Wes Hensel was on the band too. He calls me up and he says, can I borrow all your Gordon Delamont books? I'm going to teach now. Herb Pomeroy called me. I'm going to Berkeley to teach. So he took all my books. Says, I'll send them back to you. I never saw those.
But you knew you were.
So speaking of arrangers and local
Yeah.
arrangers, I mean, who were some of the other ones that you encountered during your years? Who were your favorites? You know?
Well,
Bass.
Oliver Nelson was one of my favorites. When I was with Buddy Rich here, he came to town and wrote the first album, and we did it all at the Frontier.
So yeah, that's what I said. So the first Buddy Rich band was put together here in Vegas.
66.
I don't.
66, and we did an album with Sammy at the Sands. That was the first album that band did. And
Was Bobby Shue?
Bobby
on that?
Shue was on the band,
'Cause he
yeah.
told me that that's how I knew about it.
Yeah,
I found an original score for Channel One Suite. It's in my office.
yeah.
Did the band ever rehearse here at UNLV?
No, we never rehearsed
Because
in
this chart, I don't know how this
UNLV.
chart got here.
We would use hotel rooms in the daytime.
Because it's
and
Bill
then-
Brittany's pencil. It's his pencil. But I heard that it was a show at one of the hotels that Buddy liked to go to. I don't know, Channel One with a big TV or something.
Yeah.
The girls and the big TV,
Yeah.
and he liked the music, and he asked Bill to write that chart for him. Was that one of the first in the band, or?
You know, I can't
Yeah.
remember that. I can't remember.
But you were in the original Buddy.
I was in the original band, and our house band location was on the grounds of where Bally's is now. What's that old hotel?
Desert Inn? No. Oh,
No.
no. Bally's?
It's an old hotel. It's gone now.
Dunes? No, not Dunes.
It was Bally's, then it became the MGM, but
Yeah.
right there, Aladdin. The Aladdin. And so our house, and we didn't start till all the show band. In other words, all the house bands were finished for the evening. We would play, and
Two of
everybody in town came to see Buddy Rich, and we played till 4 o'clock in
No,
the
why
morning.
did he why do you think he chose Vegas to put that band together?
He was living here. He got a house here.
Oh, Buddy was
Harry James was living here. We used to go over Harry's house every night and fall out on the carpet before the dawn came up, you know.
Thank you, Tom, Gus, and Woody, for your time today and for sharing your experiences and knowledge on the roots of jazz in Las Vegas. Take care.